Hey all, DT Neil coming back at you with various writerly things. We're in a really weird place right now, putting that mildly, in that we are careening into what can only be viewed as a dystopian world, especially in America. But not exclusively. The rest of the world is dealing with a lot of things as well, but we're certainly not helping in the States. And it's kind of funny from my perspective because as someone who's been writing for quite a long time, I've seen us segueing from the kind of ordinary world that people were familiar with into this dystopian debacle. And one of the things in the popular media is this idea, well, it's not science fiction. It's da 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 da. And science fiction in that context has been used as almost a slur to point out something that's kind of ridiculous, that's just like, it's not science fiction. These cars can fly, or whatever their story is that they're trying to push. And it's really galling because science fiction writers for decades have worked very hard to look at the present day and speculate and to go off into the future and think downstream. Well, what happens if everyone was this? What happens if this happens? What happens with this? And they made a lot of credible thought experiments in their science fiction. And the norms are it's especially a problem in the cinematic world, that they are still stuck in that 1950s, 1960s era, maybe a little toe or two into the 1970s idea of what science fiction is. So there's a lag that's apparent. And it's frustrating because science fiction offers credible extrapolations and even incredible extrapolations on things that are in play right now. And so kind of like, Cassandra, the unheralded prophet, science fiction writers have explored so many things that everyday people just don't think about until suddenly it's right at their doorstep. But there's that dismissal of like, well, it's not science fiction. And it's kind of distressing from my perspective because science fiction writers can look at what's going on right now and going, yeah, so-and-so talked about this 40 years ago or 50 years ago or even more. But people didn't read it. People didn't read that. And because again, most people don't read. And it's really frustrating because one of the key values of science fiction is that idea of kind of stress testing ideas and exploring them with scenarios, with characters and themes and ideas, and just kicking the tires on those ideas a little bit, or kicking the anti-grav boots, whatever you want to call it, however you want to view it. And if the world had paid more attention to science fiction, we might be in a better place than we are right now. It's no illusion that people often invoke the idea of late stage capitalism. And when you think about the origins of capitalism, the 18th century origins of capitalism, and how much that is still driving our world in the 21st century, an economic system rooted, originally it came about in the 1700s, right, is still dominating our lives centuries later. And of course, we're going to see problems with it. And science fiction writers have dredged through all that heavily. And it's shocking to me how little of it has taken. People can usually name off a few. They'll be like, The Martian Chronicles, Fahrenheit 451, Brave New World, etc., things like that. And for a lot of people, dystopian fiction is where people interact with science fiction versus all like the other aspects of science fiction. And I really do, if you're aware at all of the great filter, the idea of the great filter, and I'm not going to go into that, that's a really big topic, but it's impossible to look at what's going on right now in the world and not see, like, we're either going to, as a species, get our heads on straight, and overcome some of the problems that have been lingering for centuries, or we are not going to solve those and we will drive ourselves extinct and destroy, or civilization will collapse and we will have a real problem on our hands. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about science fiction because I think there's a lot to be discussed.